The past comes alive at the Pioneer Heritage Museum in Marengo. The museum has thousands of items, and each one tells a story of Iowa County's rich heritage. Whether you are interested in Iowa County's pioneer days of the mid-19th century or in researching your own roots, it is there in the Pioneer Heritage Museum. The unique displays on the museum grounds include an actual log house and cabin, a railroad depot, a Depression-era filling station, a roaring 1920s race car, and an old 19th century farmhouse. But that's only a portion of what you will discover. The museum teaches how we progressed from the old days to modern times. Journey with us back in time to the days when Iowa County was young. The log house and cabin at the museum were built by Iowa County pioneer Henry Meyer, shown here with one of his daughters, Louise. The house stood in Iowa Township for many years until the 1960s, when it was moved to near the Iowa Valley Elementary School and later relocated to the museum. Mary Meyer, another one of Henry's daughters, spent her early years in the cabin until she married Henry Dorsman. Inside the cabin and log house are many items which are representative of life in the 1800s. The cabin and log house are a testimony to the hardships faced by pioneers, but also to their spirit. In those early days, Iowa settlers and farmers depended on some basic implements.
Okay, the big plow setting up there is what they called a sod buster. They used that on ground that had never been plowed before. They called that virgin prairie, of course. And they would have two oxen on it, or two real good horses. Oxen would outpull horses. And you would go out and you'd plow, and a real good day's plowing would be 1 acre.
As the years went by, some ingenious farm tools came along.
This is what's called a fanning mill. It's for taking grass seed, this different sized grass seed, and separating it, sorting it to size, and taking the dirt and stuff like that out of the grass seed is basically what it's for. They would use it because the farmers couldn't go to town and buy grass seed at the time. They would cut hay and stuff, and they'd save the seed out of it, and then they'd run it through here so they could have it for the next year's crop. You would put the seed in here, and then you would turn it on the other side, round and around, and it would shake back and forth. Plus it had a fan in there, went around right in this area. It would shake back and forth to shake all the lighter stuff out and the heavier stuff, and it had different size screens that your seed would fall through, and it would come out in a spout right here.
The horse was one of the most important possessions and friend that anyone could have. It was important to take good care of it. Farmers found ways to do chores more efficiently, such as this dog-powered treadmill, which operated a cream separator. Other improvements were soon on the horizon. Agriculture and self-reliance made our nation strong. Exhibits show contributions made by men and women in farming. Visitors can experience the feel of turn-of-the-century rural life in the Hirsch farmhouse. The late 19th century house is actually inside the museum and has many artifacts from more than 100 years ago. The house was donated by the Hirsch family, and its eldest member, Hattie Hirsch, was on hand for the dedication ceremony. Clothing styles and fashions through the years are prominently featured in the museum. The restored Victor, Iowa Depot was originally built in the 1860s. It served the Rock Island Line for many years. By visiting the depot, one can easily imagine what it must have been like traveling by train many years ago. The railroads connected our nation from coast to coast. The vital transportation of goods was important, but railroads were also a way for presidential candidates to meet the people. Republican candidate Dwight D. Eisenhower made a whistle stop in Marengo in 1952. Throughout the Pioneer Heritage Museum, you can see many facets of small-town life, from professions such as police officer and photographer to recreation. Music was an important pastime in Iowa County. Band concerts and parades were a common sight. The Schaffner Military Band in Millersburg, Iowa, was well known around 1900. Parnell area native and former Marengo resident Clarence Whitehill achieved great fame in music during the early 1900s. Whitehill was known for his incredible voice. Other exhibits display old-time Iowa County baseball uniforms. You can view typical home life scenes from many years ago. Nearly everyone sewed their own clothes with foot-powered machines. Laundry was a time-consuming, never-ending chore. Women went to great lengths to be fashionable. Before television, the major entertainment in homes was radio. A one-room school is realistically depicted in the museum. Schools were small and heated by a wood or coal-burning stove. All grades were educated by one teacher.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Here are the first 5 sentences.
See John in his horse. See John ride his horse. Do you like corn, little horse? I see John feed the horse corn. The horse likes corn.
Very good. Okay, Amber.
Rat, cob, ham, butt, sap, pig, pop, cup, rug, toss, pig.
Very good.
Lindberghs return for holiday with relatives. The Lindberghs are back in the United States. This news astonished Americans last week. They had not known that the Colonel and Mrs. Lindbergh were planning to return from England.
An outstanding military exhibit covers the Civil War up through Desert Storm. The exhibits illustrate the changes in military uniforms and field gear. Visitors experience the time period through memorabilia and photographs. A rare Spanish-American uniform is on display. Many local people served their country during the War to End All Wars, World War I. Note the typical doughboy uniforms and memorabilia. World War II was history's deadliest war. It touched the lives of many local families. Women contributed much to the service of their country. They are remembered here. The Pioneer Heritage Museum's military exhibits ensure that the sacrifices of our men and women will never be forgotten. Marengo used to be home to one of the fastest cars around. Back in 1928, Carlos "Cocky" Myers decided he would build a race car. His son, George Myers of Marengo, recalls the car's early days.
Well, Dad built it and finished it up in 1928, and they'd worked a couple of years at it. And the engine is a 1917 Chevy Baby Grand engine. And he's modified the head on it and changed the size of the valves, and it has dual carburetors on it. One's a motorcycle carburetor and the other is a regular carburetor. And after they got it done, him and his brother went out to Denver, Colorado in it. And back then I think they run it in 24 hours, and that was supposed to have been quite a record back in them days. Back then, they used to do a lot of work out in the farms. And he would load up his tools in this and run out and they'd work on a combine, or well, they didn't have combines then, but they'd work on planters or whatever kind of machinery that broke down because they couldn't get them to town. And he just used it mostly for that, and then just a puddle jumper. But years back, he used to do some racing. And that's when the Marengo track was pretty popular here. This was supposed to be on one of the fastest half-mile tracks in the state at that time. And he done a little racing there, and finally, where Goats Dairy used to be over there, he landed upside down in the ditch there. The drive shaft fell out and pole vaulted him over the hill, so he figured then that was enough. He gave up the racing then. But after we got in high school, then we licensed it and drove it. My brother drove it, Jim. And, we'd get into trouble once in a while with it. But it would run.
Was it pretty noisy when you...
Oh, yes. It's got a 4-inch flue on it over there, and when you had the damper open, why, we could take off from here, and you could hear it when you slowed down for Ladora.
The old car could top out at speeds of 100 miles per hour. And what did George like best about the race car?
Well, the best thing was that when you was playing around, there's nobody caught you.
In the 1960s, Cocky Myers' race car would make appearances in area parades. In 1965, it was retired from the streets. Now, thanks to Cocky Myers' family, everyone can have a chance to see a hand-built, one-of-a-kind race car. The local filling station was a place where the customer truly received full service. You could get everything from a fan belt to engine work done. Today's convenience stores have taken over and filling stations have almost vanished. Fred's service station in Hartwick, Iowa, was owned and operated by Fred Bees for almost a half century. Stations such as Fred's used to dot the countryside and main streets of America. It was donated by Fred to the Pioneer Heritage Museum, finding a permanent home in 1992.
Good afternoon, Ken.
Fill her up, George.
All righty. We'll load her up for you. How's that oil today?
Oh, I think it's pretty good.
Pretty good. We'll get that glass a little bit here for you.
Okay.
Looks like you need some new windshield wiper blades there.
Yeah. I sure do.
Thank you much.
Stations did more than just pump gas. Customers could schedule all kinds of car maintenance.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, we can put you down for about Thursday afternoon. How would that be?
It is sad that many young people will no longer experience this part of our heritage. Fred Bees recalled the filling station was more than a place of business. It was a place where your customers became your friends. The family doctor's office was stocked full of remedies and supplies. It took on a personality all its own. What a difference there was between that and today's sprawling, look-alike medical clinics. Small-town stores, such as general stores, neighborhood groceries, and clothing stores, had unique appeal to their customers. They were cozy. The items on your list were easy to find, and you didn't have to walk miles of aisles to shop. The Marengo Fire Department has seen a long history. The early days saw changes in fire companies. Firefighting became more scientific as color codes were used to identify buildings made of more combustible materials. Equipment changed greatly through the years as well. When did you join the fire department?
In 1948.
And you served how long on the fire department? In the 70s.
In a total number of years was 35, which would be about 1983. And during that 35 years, I was fire chief for 15 years.
And your dad was a fire chief?
Yes, he was a fire chief before my time. And I took over at that time when he died.
What were the biggest fires in town that you remember during that time?
We had quite a few in those days. We had what they called the canning factory, where they canned corn. That was a big fire, right at the edge of the south edge of the town.
Right over by
southeast by the railroad tracks. And then we had uptown, we had several big fires. The Knipple fire, Knipple Studios they called it.
Was that a furniture place?
No, they made specialty, well, they oil screen paintings for a, they sprayed these paints on woodworking, and they made things for beer companies, display ads and such. And then there was a big fire on the corner where we have the Peterson's drug now. It burnt the inside of that out. Then they had a fire over on the east side of the square, next to the hotel, and it was Bowen's Hatchery. It was a hatchery at that time, and it burned. So we had quite a few big fires.
And then there was the big bank fire.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah, I forgot that.
And it said in the newspaper that a telephone operator noticed the switchboard flashing or lighting up.
Yeah, it could be. I forget the details.
How long did it take to get that fire under control, or to burn itself out, or whatever?
It burned for a couple of days off and on. It'd keep rekindling because it was such a hot fire, and you couldn't wet it down enough. And they was trying to save as many records as they could without soaking them down. And I guess there wasn't anything damaged in the vault.
I think they still used that old vault for a number of years afterwards.
It's still in use, yes.
A 1938 fire truck was part of the department's active roster for decades. Bob Simmons, former Marengo fire chief, knows this truck both inside and out.
It supplied all the water for fighting the fire. It had quite a capacity for a truck at that time. And for the fact that we only had, I think, 95 horsepower is all we had, but that was all we needed. You could supply 500 gallons per minute, and that's the pressure that you needed it. It was a real good pumper. And that's I think they was basically about all the same for all different fire equipment. They had different ways of engaging the pumps and stuff, but outside of that, they was major things were about the same. And once you got it going, then you regulated the governor to kind of maintain your pressure the same. They'd pump up about, it seemed to me it was up around 200, 250 pounds of pressure. And that was a lot of pressure. It was quick for priming. And I bet you I bet you Printer had those tires for as long as the truck is old. A long time. Yeah. We would drive it to the fire and hook into the system. It still pump a lot of water. It's fast. Last time that I know that we had any call to use it, we used it on a big fire where we could use our 500 gallons. So, and it sat there and pumped for hours, no problem. That was a good old siren. They made them to last those days. They made them that way to start with.
The old pumper fire truck was on the scene of one of Marengo's most devastating fires, the Iowa County Savings Bank, December 24th, 1953. Bob Dillon of Marengo worked at the bank and vividly remembers that fire.
I first found out about the fire as hearing the fire sirens, of course, and realizing that there was a fire downtown, but I didn't know that, when I first heard it that this was at the bank. And when I did realize it was there, of course I came up to the bank, and one of the first things that I seen, of course, was the smoke rolling out from all the windows and so forth. And one of the things that there was water all over on the streets from where the firemen had been pouring water in the building. One of the aspects of the fire, which stands out, of course, in a lot of people's minds, was the fact that on the streets of Marengo, that morning of the fire, they seen hundreds of little yellow piggy banks floating around in the water. And this is one of them here. And these were obtained because in 1954 would mark the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Iowa County Savings Bank.
The interior of the bank was gutted. Offices in the same building sustained severe damage. The contents of the bank vault were unharmed, including a box of chocolates. The bank never lost one day of business. Operations were moved to the Iowa Electric Building, and in 1956, a new bank was opened. Besides the numerous exhibits, the Pioneer Heritage Museum can also help you with family tree research. Neitha Meyer of the Iowa County Genealogical Society explains.
We have several files here. We have this file right over here that has names in it, and possibly you could find that person's name, and that would show whether we had maybe an obituary on it or family history on it. Possibly somebody has done a family tree of that person. We would have that in our family history file. Several scrapbooks have been sent in, and we keep stuff out of that and file it where it's supposed to be, and cross-index most everything that we have so that we know that person's name that writes in. We'll check our files to see if we have anything on that person that they're searching for. That's how we go about it. Then we have atlases if they've been a farmer. We have the 1874 atlas, the 1900 and the 1917, and this shows the property owners in Iowa County at that time, and if they own land, we can find them that way. We also have a lot of microfilm that has the early land deeds on, the early marriages. Possibly we can find it in a marriage or in a death listing that we have. We have the county records on microfilm from the marriages from 1847 to 1910, and deaths and births from 1880, because no births and deaths were registered in Iowa until that time. So we have a lot of avenues that we can search for our name.
History is ongoing and is passed from generation to generation. The Pioneer Heritage Museum is a wonderful opportunity for all to appreciate their heritage. For it is our heritage which is our legacy.